what can Microsoft security solutions do to help us with our zero trust journey? So before we deep dive on Microsoft security, one thing that I would like to get across is that there is a misconception that Azure AD is a Microsoft identity platform for Microsoft products. And that's not the case. It's an enterprise identity platform for Microsoft products, of course, but also for any SaaS application, for any in-house built line of business application, anything can be integrated with it. We support open standards such as OAuth and SAML. So this isn't just about Microsoft. This is about the wider ecosystem that you manage and you deploy for your users. So identity and security solutions from Microsoft, not just for Microsoft. I just want to mention this slide as well. There were some announcements made a few weeks ago on Ignite. Some of our products, they have been renamed. Azure Sentinel is now called Microsoft Sentinel. Microsoft Cloud App Security, formerly MCAS, is now called Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Azure Defender and Azure Security Center are now called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So this is Microsoft's Zero Trust lineup, and we do have the best lineup in the industry. We are the only company that can protect all your identities, all your devices, all your applications, and all your data. We have Azure AD, Identity Protection. We've got Microsoft Defender for Identity to protect your on-premise domain controllers. We have Microsoft Defender for Endpoints and Microsoft Intune to protect and manage your on-prem devices. We've got Microsoft Information Protection and Insider Risk Management to help you detect, investigate, remediate potential misuse of data. And we've got Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, used to be called MCAS. So that's our CASB solution, which allows you to discover and control the use of shadow IT. And at the bottom of all of this, we have Microsoft Sentinel, our cloud native SIEM. So all the signals from all these solutions, they go into Sentinel. So now you can have a complete view across your state. You have visibility of everything that's going on. You can have machine learning point out to you when there is unusual behavior, and even automatically remediate potential security threats. So this lineup is the most comprehensive in the industry, and it can really help you advance as you move towards this new zero trust architecture. The first thing that we look at when starting our zero trust journey is consolidating secure access to all applications, whether they are on-prem or in the cloud. And to achieve that, we use Azure AD. So Azure AD can synchronize with on-premise Active Directory, it can connect to cloud HR systems, and it can also allow access to external users, such as partners, for example, using things like B2B and guest invitations. And we have a lot of enterprise customers these days with workloads on multiple cloud providers. And many of them, they might have duplicate identities for their admin users. For example, an admin might have an account in Azure AD and another one in AWS and even a third one in Google Cloud Platform. They may even have the same passwords to make it easy to remember. And how do you solve this problem? How do you make this multi-cloud access more secure? So you can use Azure AD as your identity provider across all these cloud platforms to centralize your identities and extend the protection that Microsoft Cloud gives you to secure your whole multi-cloud environment. And with that, you can enable single sign-on, passwordless authentication, user sign-in risk analysis, conditional access, and you can do that to all your applications, including AWS Console and Google Cloud Platform Admin Console for your developers and your administrators. The next step is to ensure that only the right people on secure, compliant devices can access your data and your applications from anywhere. And to achieve these, we implement conditional access. Conditional access requires an Azure AD Premium P1 license. But how does this work? So conditional access takes in identity-related security signals, including user behavior, location, device state, applications, And then it determines the appropriate policy to apply for access to a resource, such as allowing, limiting, blocking access, or even implementing additional verification measures like stepping up multi-factor authentication. So it gives you the power to enforce the core principle of zero trust, never trust and always verify. And you can create policies to secure your resources in many different ways. For example, you can only allow admins to access the Azure portal from a compliant device, only from authorized locations, maybe only from countries where you have a main office. You can choose to block downloads and uploads from an unmanaged device. So, for example, a developer won't be able to upload code to a storage account or an S3 bucket from an unknown device that may be compromised. And you can require multi-factor authentication when accessing high privilege resources like Azure Portal, or it could be even a payroll application. So it enables you to fine-tune access based on contextual user information, such as user, device state, and location. And you can take the level of protection that conditional access gives you to the next level by combining it with Azure AD identity protection. So identity protection uses Azure AD threat intelligence to determine user and sign-in risk. So it's all about automated risk detection and remediation. It can protect you from leaked credentials. So when cybercriminals compromise users' passwords, they often post these on the web, or they might trade or sell these credentials on the black market. And when Microsoft leaked credential services acquires users' credentials from the dark web or other sources, these are checked against Azure AD users' current valid credentials to find matches. And if a match is found, then identity protection can automatically prompt the user to change his password. It can detect requests coming from anonymous IP addresses, for example, Tor browser or anonymous VPN. And these IP addresses, they're typically used by attackers who want to hide their telemetry for malicious intent. And it can also protect users from impossible travel by identifying two sign-ins originating from geographically distant locations, and then analyzing the time between the two sign-ins and the time that you would have taken for the user to travel from the first location to the second location. So conditional access and identity protection are two solutions that work together to complement each other. And identity protection requires Azure AD Premium P2 license. So we talked about consolidating access to your applications using Azure AD and single sign-on, then protecting access for any user from anywhere with conditional access and identity protection. Now we need to discuss the weakest link in the chain, which is passwords. So enabling multi-factor authentication, it is the single most important action that you can take into protecting your environment. If you're only going to do one thing to protect your resources, it should be to turn on multi-factor authentication. It has shown to prevent up to 99% of identity attacks. But what I really want to emphasize with this slide is passwordless authentication. So most data breaches, they will involve weak, default, or stolen passwords. We know that users nowadays, they are really good at creating complex passwords. We spent the last few decades telling them to use a combination of lowercase, uppercase, symbols, and numbers, so they can come up with a really good, strong password. But the problem is that they then go and they use the same password on every single account they have, because that's the only one they can remember. And passwords are breached constantly. There are a number of studies and analytical data out there that can back this point up. Traditional MFA is the mainstream solution, but it's not necessarily the most user-friendly or convenient. We do support a broad range of authentication options. So for best customer experience on the PC, we do recommend you use Windows Hello. And for flexibility, convenience, cost, we recommend you use Microsoft Authenticator mobile app, which is free. We also support FIDO2 security keys, which are now available from several of our partners. So, there's no excuse for not using passwordless. If you use Microsoft Authenticator mobile app, it's free. You can use passwordless. And it's important to note that for many customers, there is not one solution that will necessarily cover all your business use cases. And for many customers, they're finding that a mix and match of all our passwordless offerings, it works best for them. So the goal here is to minimize the surface area of passwords within your organization as much as possible, which is why you should leverage all the technologies available. So the next pillar I want to talk to you about is using the least privilege access model. So this is really important because if you follow the least privilege access model and one of your identities is taken over, then it can only do a small number of low risk things because it only had permissions to do a very specific job. We know that attacks are getting more sophisticated, but so are the environments that you have to protect. And in fact, hybrid and multi-cloud architectures, they have become the norm. And the number of identities that access cloud infrastructure, it has increased exponentially, especially non-human identities. And all these identities, they need permissions to authenticate to other machines and digital services, to perform automated configuration tasks, and to access customer data. With each workload that you deploy, permissions multiply, which increases your surface attack. Thousands, if not millions, of complex digital entities now have virtually unlimited access privileges. Some may even have more privileges than administrators. And you have to keep in mind that, unfortunately, over time, if you don't manage your identities well, what will happen is that you get this big creep. Gradually, over time, identities can do more and more things. So maybe a person changing jobs, they move to a new role, you don't remove some of their old privileges, or it's an identity software and the developer just keeps adding more and more privileges to it, and you get this huge creep. And then out of a sudden, you got way more risk in your system than you needed, and you lost that least privilege access approach. So how do you minimize risk? You do so with security and access policies that follow the zero trust principle of least privilege. And you do that with policies that will stay consistent across your different cloud environments and your on-prem infrastructure. So this is why earlier this year, Microsoft acquired CloudNox. So CloudNox tackles the least privilege access principle in zero trust by minimizing account privileges. And the unique technology helps organizations manage permissions for all types of identities across all clouds. Our traditional identity governance and privilege access management systems, they're great for on-premises, but when we extend them to cloud workload, they start to struggle because they're simply not designed for the cloud. And today, very few tools can address complex security and compliance across all clouds and on-prem. So it's time to reimagine the way we govern and protect identity and access, and CloudNox is a critical piece of this vision. There was a session on Microsoft Ignite a few weeks ago that talked about CloudNox. If you haven't seen the Ignite security videos yet, I do recommend you do so. These have been recorded, so you can catch up on demand. And there will be more announcements on CloudNox next year as our engineers work on the integration with Microsoft. So do keep an eye out for new content on this topic. Thank you for your time today. I hope you found this session informative. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft security tools, please check out our security community webinar. The link is on your screen right now. So I'll hand over to Pete now. Thank you.